2, 3. It says we're live. I don't know what day it is. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Mate, I don't care. All I know is that it's 1 o'clock because we made an appointment to be here. I know that. I got that right, didn't I?
Yeah.
Okay. So I can tell the time correctly. I made a bit of a big deal about it yesterday when I did a show with Simon. But I have to point it out again for anybody else that's going to join us in the chat or watch the replay. But mate, I'm impressed with your lockdown beard, man. It's getting up there. You know, bring your chin a little bit closer to the camera, mate. Let's.
Not as good as yours.
Oh my gosh, you got a tickler going on there, my friend.
Oh, it's just laziness, really. This is surreal what we're going through. You know, so I'm just, I guess, enjoying certain aspects. So I don't have to be white collared every morning. I can be just, I can be a hobo.
My beard was kind of laziness for about 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
Then I just decided to say to myself, well, look, I won't shave until my first day back at work.
Yeah.
Which can't come soon enough.
How did Simon say about? I'd be interested to know what Simon thinks about England, the lockdown, and everything. Is he all right?
Yeah. We spoke about it a bit yesterday. He might even be up, so I won't be surprised if he pops into the chat.
Okay.
So he's pretty lucky where he is and his job too, because he can operate and perform his duties from home anyway. You know, being involved in IT. So
yeah.
So that's a good thing. And he did mention the fact too, because of his age. So, you know, that's not a good thing too. You know, you need to self-isolate because anyone over 60 is susceptible to picking it up. In a funny kind of way, buddy, I think we're pretty lucky here that we've been able to get closed down nationally. I don't think... I don't think the UK has had a national close down.
It's a bit like America and Australia. I was talking to my brother.
Yeah,
it's really much a grey area. It's like yes and no, and do this, but you know, don't do that. But maybe do this, but maybe do that. There's no levels. There's no levels.
Well, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but don't be surprised, mate, if you see if you see the army on the streets, road blocking streets, bridges, roads between towns, you know, don't be surprised if that happens.
Here or overseas?
Here. I think the government would want to push as much of these unique laws that they have open to them as much as they can.
Wow.
I'm sure. That's my own personal opinion.
Yeah, it's my brother's got his own theory about all this, but I won't go into that because it's long-winded. But that's good that Simon's all right.
Oh, yeah. And we had a couple of cats in the chat yesterday. There's a couple of guys from the States. Sonia from Texas, you might remember her. And another guy, Pork Chop from Texas, was in the chat and then you've got Kubrick Lover, who's a little bit older too. So, yeah, you know, people are taking it seriously. Yeah,
I just want this 4 weeks, and maybe introduce testing on certain clusters. The government we got you're in the building industry, and I'm somewhat in the building industry with real estate. We've got to have guys with tool belts on, hammering away. We've got to have productivity.
Oh, I think what we're going to have, mate, is we're going to have a fundamentally different New Zealand than we've had in the past. We're going to have a very self-contained New Zealand, which contradicts everything that these parliamentarians are about, you know, open borders and movement of people. But I think in New Zealand, you're going to see a lot of Kiwis holidaying nationally. You're going to see a lot of businesses manufacturing locally, despite what the production or retail or wholesale costs might be. I think people have realized that buying cheap overseas for the last 10, 15, 20 years has had an effect. I think without getting too political and opening myself up to some criticisms, I think a lot of New Zealanders will look overseas at some of these countries
Iceland.
skeptically.
Yeah,
And
but I think countries like Iceland and Denmark and Sweden and Switzerland, who have been always the top 10 countries to live in, have had that approach nationally for the longest time.
yeah, well, I don't think we're going to have the interaction with China like we've had in the past.
Isn't it funny how all the liberals and everybody's attacked Trump for saying, "Oh, why are you trying to close the border and why are you trying to introduce manufacturing back in America?" And now he's saying, "But I was right the whole time because that's what you want me to do."
Well, he made it quite clear, didn't he, that manufacturing was going to come back to America, and hopefully we'll see that here in New Zealand. A lot of businesses in the manufacturing industry, and the furniture industry that we're involved in, the building industry, went overseas because it was cheaper for them to operate overseas.
Yeah, I'd rather have 1 or 2 pairs of jeans that are made in USA or made in New Zealand as opposed to 10 pairs made in China. Well, the 10 pairs might be all different colors, and I might have lots, but how many pairs of jeans do you need?
Well, I'm certainly going to be looking at where I'm going to be buying my gear from. For example, am I going to buy another made in China Squire guitar, despite how good they are? Maybe I should just save up a little bit more and buy that American-made Fender Telecaster.
Yeah. No, there's definitely they need a lesson as far as I'm concerned. They treat their people like crap, and it's all about greed and gluttony. But thank God we got music.
Oh yeah, music, family, and friends.
and in this case, it's all about made in the UK.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I don't know if you caught any of the show that I did last night with Simon, but he made an interesting point. Now, I don't know whether it was something that he thought of, or it was a direct result of him watching another YouTube show. I can't quite remember. But he was making the connection with that Beano album and how Clapton had the JTM 45 amp and having that in his boot, going out playing live in front of people, getting that tone that people were listening to from the album, had an effect on a generation of blues or British rock guitarists. I think he's got a point. You were listening to an album and you were watching a band that sounded just like the album.
Oh yeah. There's no point. I mean, it's what I like about Keith Richards in the studio, and he had a thing about. They asked him, "Why aren't you a big pedal guy?" And he says, "Well, I started the pedal craze with Satisfaction with that fuzz pedal, and I flirted with it a little bit, but he said something about he's not much of a tap dancer, or he needs his feet to stay up. He stumbles a lot, and he just wants to try and get a very authentic sound."
Well, it's interesting that he should say that, because obviously that's one of Keith-isms that I can't. I'm no good at tap dancing, and I can barely stand up straight, with my 2 feet. But certainly in his biography, he makes it quite clear that he likes that feeling that he gets between the guitar, the lead, and the amp. You can't beat that.
No. I mean, and it was just we're talking about barbecuing with the neighbour yesterday and getting that sweet spot between the air coming in and the right heat with the wood and the coal and the charcoal. A bit like a Well, it's a bit like a motor with the carburetor and the timing the timing with the fuel and the air, same thing. With the same with music.
Mate, I don't doubt you. It's just that I don't know anything about it. But yeah, I agree. There must be some science, some method behind the process.
Oh yeah. Well, no, just that you mentioned before about less water jams turned up loud are as effective, if in some cases more effective than a stack. I mean, they're finding that sweet spot between a natural overdrive, a couple of fat humbuckers, a guitar that's in tune with the guy playing it who knows how to play.
Sure.
It's just the right ingredients.
Sure.
And the world's never been the same because he was the first guy to find that, dare I say it, happy amalgamation between blues and rock. Rock, I think that rock was the crunch. There's a bit of crunch there.
I reminded Simon too of the show that you and I did a couple of days beforehand, where you mentioned that John Mayall realised very early on that he had to market Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton, Blues Breakers with Eric Clapton. He was very smart. He needed to do that, and he didn't have a problem doing that right from the word go because that was going to bring in money. Whereas the guys in the Yardbirds were resentful about Clapton's growing popularity with girls and guys, and they didn't like that. John Mayall certainly saw that, witnessed it, and tapped into it.
Absolutely, yeah. A young gun, a hot shot, a top gun, a maverick, a mysterious guy, a loner. He was all these things. And he was record
sales.
Yeah. He was the money. He was the $1 million man, the money man. The what do they call that? The money shot is what they call it. The money shot. Yeah. So no. Simon's right. And to this day, I still listen to that album a lot. The guys can duplicate the sound right now. They love duplicating it, but for him to come up with that sound back in that time frame, people all across America, young guys who had raised on the surf sound, that sweet sound with, the Beach Boys and the very Fenderish, very Fendery. Man, imagine Gibson sales would have gone through the roof.
Yeah, but also don't forget the UK. You had the Shadows going, and you had that surf sound going with Liverpool bands, that very clean, voxy sound. Maybe it was overproduced also in the in the studio with a lot of reverb. Again, what's really interesting is that the young cats that were listening to these live bands were obviously hearing something, I think, different from what they were hearing on the records. So, but then they go and see the Blues Breakers, and they're actually hearing and seeing somebody perform just as good as the record. So that straight away that there's this captivative aspect, because you look at that album, Carl. It influenced Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, Paul Kossoff, Peter Green. Who else?
Everyone. The other thing is you had a 21-year-old who in the Yardbirds was playing quite good but sounding like a young man. Blues Breakers, you sound like a 40-year-old. In the matter of 6 months, his sound matured a generation. So it's unbelievable. To this day, he's still not duplicated.
Oh yeah. I think it's phenomenal. It's and it just opened up a gateway to guys that could actually perform that sound. All they needed was an amp, a Les Paul. You and I have spoken about this personally, privately, in our conversations over the years, and I'm sure we must have mentioned it on a couple of shows in the past. But that JTM 45, Jim Marshall was basing that circuit on the Fender Bassman.
Yep. Which would have been some pretty heavy speakers big speakers? 210s, is it, or 212s?
Four tens, but
Oh wow!
yeah, that's what he wanted. He wanted to get that sound, So
Wow,
it's interesting.
Wow, yeah. Well,
Interesting.
baseman's not a light amp.
No.
Yeah. So yeah. So yeah, going from a Vox to a JTM 45. Wow, what a leap!
Big time. From a Telecaster and a Vox, or a Gretsch and a Vox, to a Les Paul and a Marshall. People can't underestimate that leap, Carl. You and I can, and I don't want to sound snobbish because we're guitar players and we've played those guitars over the years, but if you've never played those guitars and those amps, you really don't get an appreciation of that leap.
Well, you go from 2 pickups to 4 pickups, 2 speakers to 4 speakers. So just the sound just doubled and thickened. But you still got it clean if you wanted it.
So just share with us. So before you brought your Les Paul in Auckland, what were you using? What were you using before you bought your Les Paul? Can you remember?
I wasn't hardly playing. I didn't know any chords or anything. I just started. I wanted a nice guitar, and I think I had I had a Segovia guitar, which was a Chinese copy of a Strat, which is with terrible sound, and that got stolen in a house burglary, so I had nothing.
Okay.
But
so you went from a cheap Strat to a Gibson.
Yeah, but that Gibson was really unique. I still wish I had it. It's probably worth a fortune. It had many humbuckers. It had small humbuckers.
Awesome.
It was a very unique guitar. I did some stupid things, but it didn't have that fat humbucky sound at all. It had a very jazzy sound.
Do you think it's because of the amp that you were playing at the time that you couldn't crank the amp up, because you had a 410 back then, didn't you?
Oh yeah. No, but I had everything wrong back then. We were rehearsing in a concrete basement, and looking back now, I think because there was no bass player for a long time, I was doing a lot of bass and rhythm parts. So I had everything toned down. I had the tone all off.
Oh,
so I was doing a kind of a bass rhythm guitar playing.
Sure.
So, I look back now, because you have to adapt to the sound, and if you've got a lead singer who's got a Stratocaster and there's no bass player, I'm doing all the stuff in between.
Yeah.
But no, it was a lot of fun. It was really good. I don't even know what happened to all that stuff. I just forget if my brother sold it when I was overseas, or
probably.
I don't know. No, sold it. Yeah, probably paid me back. But I look back, and that's just a beautiful amp. Far out. One of these days I'll get all that stuff back.
Sure.
But
yeah. So I'm just illustrating the point. Yeah, of going from a single coil guitar yourself to a humbucker. It's phenomenal. If you've experienced that yourself, and as a guitar based kind of show, it's the difference is night and day.
Yeah, and Eddie Van Halen's, he wanted that Strat comfort, the lightness, and he wanted the maple neck and the Clapton. He wanted the Clapton of the new and the Clapton of the old, and he had to get settled with the humbuckers, right?
Yeah. Well, that's right. He just didn't want but he's also smart. You got to remember, these guys are very, very smart cookies. Like, the Beatles, for example, purposely kept away from Stratocasters because they didn't want to be associated with the shadows. Jimmy Page was the big Les Paul guy when Eddie Van Halen was on the scene. So he didn't want to have a Les Paul because he didn't want to be compared or have comparisons to Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
So whacking a humbucker and a Strat kind of killed two birds with one stone.
Yep, a lot of those punk bands in the 80s and 90s did the same thing. had that Stratocaster body with the couple of humbuckers, which makes sense. You got to fill out that sound somehow. You can still get a nice crunch with a single coil, but you know, if you just want to go to that next level of width.
It amazes me. It amazes me, buddy, that up into the late 70s, a guitar with a single humbucker was unheard of. You know, a Strat type.
Oh wow! Did he start that, Eddie Van Halen? That
Yeah,
trend? Did
he
not know
started
that.
it.
Wow! So everybody was either one or the other. He basically said, "I'm going to build my own guitar."
Yeah. You know, again, you know, just amazing. These insular, very driven, direct approach guys. You know, he wasn't listening to anybody. He wasn't interested in any frameworks put around him, any boundaries. You know, he was quite happy to just do what he wanted, and that kind of takes a bit of courage, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the best bands I like are the bands that, I mean, obviously started out with the blues, but they got their own voice later.
Yeah.
You know, just their own sound. Yeah, him, Queen, U2. I mean, they're instantly recognisable.
Stevie Ray Vaughan,
Yeah.
Brian May. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Instantly, Eddie Van Halen. You know,
Yep.
Instantly, BB King.
Yep. No, you can't copy that sound. It's a combination of a sound that they've created and obviously their fingertips.
Yeah.
No, that's good. No, I like that bluesbreaker sound. Is something that we'll never see ever again, I don't think.
Oh, it's just I've said it to you before. I just wish I had a copy of that whole album without the vocals.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'll go on record. You know that the vocals are a bit harsh. You have to put that aside.
Yeah. He wasn't the greatest singer. But apart from that, I mean, the start of many decades of great blues rock guitar playing. I did see a picture on the Facebook or the Instagram of Eric playing a Red Lucy reissue or something.
Yeah, that's correct.
He's playing. He might have been in his office or his living room at his house and or somewhere, and just going through all these guitars.
Yeah,
I was watching actually. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Karen.
I was just watching him and Keith Richards doing their rehearsals at the 50th or 60th celebration, and Eric was playing a tobacco Strat and Keith was playing a yellow Strat. These guys have got thousands of guitars.
He was playing a Mary Kay.
What does that mean?
A Mary Kay Strat. So, you know, top of the range. That's what Keith was playing. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So these guys are obviously not playing Gibsons, but their solos are really great and their styles are so different. But Eric's solo they just did a 10-minute jam with Chuck Berry. And I just couldn't believe how sweet and fluid Eric was. And then Keith plays, and it's really raw and really edgy and totally different, but they're both amazing.
Oh, it's I think that's one of the most underrated DVDs in the history of rock and roll music. You know, that Keith Richards organized gig for
really?
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Gives you a good insight. There's no mucking around. You know, you can see that Keith wants to get the job done well. And certainly Chuck Berry, his playing, the way that he's looking, you know, telling Keith off, the fact that Clapton comes along, and it's just they're kind of in awe of these of that guy too, because they're actually playing with one of their heroes, and yet they're standing there sharing the stage with him. It's phenomenal.
Oh yeah, no, it's dream come true for anyone. And what a lineup! what a lineup! And Sean, John Lennon's son does a good job, and Linda Ronstadt does a good job, and yeah, no, just. I think my a friend of mine back in Texas, I think he bought the deleted scenes or 20th anniversary of that DVD or record
Yeah,
or something. Is there a whole
yeah,
bunch of bonus material? Is there?
yeah. I don't have that one, but if you
Yeah,
do see it, pick it up.
yeah, yeah. I'd love to, I like the sound. So they got NRBQ's bass player, and they got Steve Jordan, I think, on drums, and just amazing band. So tight too.
Yeah. So Clapton's playing his signature strat there, so he cranks it up a little bit when they're playing live at the gig. But yeah, I think you're right. The differences between the two styles, it's chalk and cheese, and you can see it plainly. You can see that fluid. Yeah,
Fuck
I'm here.
off. Hello?
There's someone trying to ring you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. There's someone trying to ring you. Hello. I can hear you. I can see you. I can see you. How's it going? I can hear you. Okay. We've lost Carl because somebody's tried to ring him during this lockdown period. But yeah, if you guys didn't get a chance to see the show that I did last night with Simon, watch the introduction especially. It's pretty phenomenal. I must say so myself, because the insight that Simon brings to the conversation between what that Beano album was for a generation of blues players and the equipment, the sound that these guys were hearing. And we have Sonny Boy. G'day, mate. How's it going? Someone tried ringing you again.
Yeah. Just knocks out all the sound.
Yeah, it does. We've got Great Vanzini in the chat saying g'day. So Great Vanzini is from Oregon. We've spoken about him before, Carl. He was, when he was a young guy, he was listening to the Beano album when it first came out.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So anyway, what we were talking about before we got rudely interrupted.
Oh no, just talking about that DVD, that Chuck Berry, and just the British guys, and and just obviously summarising all about the gear and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? I think you've made a good comparison there for us to watch in future. You've got that fluid style of Clapton versus that chunky, jerky style of Keith Richards, but together they play really well. So obviously when Keith was playing with Brian Jones must have been a fluid, delicate player too.
More so, yeah. Apparently, I was listening to Ian Stewart interview, and when they first got together in that Edith Grove, it was Brian that was the clever guitar player. He knew jazz, he knew rhythm, he knew slide. Obviously, Keith knew one basic style, and was very shy, but he got very good in a short amount of time. But they had two different styles, but they could interweave. Brian was the cleaner guy that held it down. That's why he played the Vox, so the single coil against the humbucker. It could cut. The two could cut together, cut a difference.
Yeah, and I think if if we're going to be honest about what Keith was doing, Keith hints upon it in his biography. That he was certainly a disciple of Chuck Berry, so he had those Chuck Berry licks down. When they got together at Edith Grove, it was Brian Jones who showed him the Jimmy Reed stuff. Just playing an E 12 bars for 4, 5, 6 hours a day, just getting that groove, locking in, and just playing. Nothing can substitute that, Carl. I think as guitar players ourselves, we can appreciate that. If you get together with a guy or a couple of guys or a band, in that first 10 minutes, half an hour, you're going to play like shit. But an hour later, 2 hours later, or 3 hours later, if you're lucky, you're pretty good. So there is truth in that, isn't there?
Absolutely, yeah. No. That interweaving they did, that 6 months of the worst winter in 100 years, was the bedrock of their playing.
Yeah.
And that 6 months or 3 months that Eric Clapton disappeared for, and just shut all the doors and the windows and locked himself in a room. I think Slash did the same thing, and Eddie Van Halen. It was just all the difference.
Yeah. Well, these guys are driven, aren't they? They almost, without me, proving it, and I certainly say it respectfully. It's almost as if these guys had OCD. To be able to focus for hours and hours on end. When you look at what young people are doing these days, apparently they can't focus for more than 10 minutes.
Yeah, well, it was all they had. There was no social media, there's no YouTube, there's very limited resources, and they had to really knuckle down. And you can hear them. They're playing just their like you mentioned the word. Their focus, their intent, their mission.
Well, Clapton's had friends go on record saying that they would have to sit there while Clapton was playing a tape deck, and he'd play a big Bull Brunsey song, and he'd play what he was hearing back until it sounded perfect. Now, and Clapton's friends said that this was in a park, a common across the road from where they lived, and this was all day Saturday. This was a whole day.
Shit. Yeah. Well, yeah. That was their life. They were going to be blues musicians and tell the world about it too. Messengers. Absolute messengers. Really good. So should we talk about? We'll talk about the animals before my phone dies. The second part of the series.
Oh, off you go. Yeah. Lead into it. Off you go.
I just we talked about the zombies the other day. I just wanted the final thing was Clive Davis, who was the head of the CBS, heard that album and he said, "I don't like it. We're not going to release it." And Al Cooper said, "Let's give it a second chance." I think Al Cooper was in England and took it back to America and said, "Let's give it a shot." And it became an underground classic.
So who do you put that down to? Who's responsible?
A musician hearing musicians as opposed to a businessman trying to hear money.
But does that mean that we disrespect anything that Clive may have done in the past or up until then? Because he certainly had a good ear, didn't he?
Well, Berry Gordy had a great ear, and he didn't want Marvin Gaye to release What's Going On. He said, "Oh, this is a bunch of hippie, social conscious crap."
That's correct.
And look, it's one of the probably top 20 or 50 albums of all time.
And in fact, when they had a meeting at Motown Records, their weekly meeting, he got voted down by everybody, for that song. Yeah. So, is very happy to go on record to say he got it wrong.
Yeah. Well, and same thing with Exile on Main Street. At that time, they were like, "What is this?" And then all of a sudden, it just blossomed and grew on everybody through the years.
Yeah, well, that's where music critics and music reviews aren't worth really the paper they're written on, are they? Because everybody dished that album, Exile on Main Street. Hardly anybody gave it any credit.
Yeah.
Mishmash. Could this be the end of the Rolling Stones?
Yeah. Oh, just everything will stand the test of time, and it did. And they're still playing, and those critics or reviewers are probably dead or out of a job. I don't know. Yeah, it's good to have good to have constructive criticism, or it's good to have an input. That's your job, but to what level, what cost? So I don't know. But I just want to mention about the zombies and how, because it coincide with what you said about the other show about do people who work for record companies have a musical bone, or are they just business people? And it's probably a combination of both. And we talked about a smart record company will hire a musician to be a talent scout, an A&R man.
So Al Cooper's responsible for fighting for that album, clearly.
Yeah, yep. And after the fact, they've said that there's nothing else ever been like it, or just for everything that was going on at that time, it was the perfect. It was the right place, right time music.
So when that album dropped, was it a top 10 record?
I don't think so, but that one song did, "Time of the Season."
Sure.
So that was obviously what got everybody listening, the lure. But yeah, no, this next band we'll talk about had a similar sort of approach. So the Animals, so this is the second part of this 5-part series, hailed from Newcastle. And Eric Burdon had that same passion we talked about, like with Eric and your Mick Jaggers, of they wanted to be bluesmen. I think Eric Burdon's guy his main guy was John Lee Hooker.
Yes. And,
a 5'6" guy, working class, tough as nails. And what I like I made this connection with the Animals and with the Zombies, is these bands weren't guitar hero bands. The guitar played a second fiddle. These bands revolved around the keyboards and organ. All their key licks and rhythms and melodies were all organ-based. So I'm actually glad we're talking about this, because we've taken a bit of emphasis off the guitar, which we really like. But their music's based around strong singing and organ. House of the Rising Sun, we all know that song. What would that be like without that organ?
Good question.
It'd be a great song, but it just wouldn't be the same.
Yeah. And interesting in 1965, 64, was it 64, 65?
64.
Okay, so straight away a haunting organ comes out amongst all these guitar sounds, guitar albums, guitar songs.
And Giorgio Gamescli, who was tied up with the Yardbirds and the Stones a little bit, heard wind of them in Newcastle, said, "You come down to London," and you mentioned it right there. In order for them to break through, that Alan Price was a clever guy. They had that haunting song, haunting singing, and that haunting organ, and that was just the whole London was like, "What is this?" One song of the year in London in New Musical Express Awards.
So the Animals had to come to London to break, didn't they? To record,
Yeah.
That was clear. So none of this was recorded or produced in Newcastle. We have to make that clear. They came to be part of the thriving, bubbling R&B scene that was happening in London at the time.
Yeah, and let's face it, they had a somewhat fresh sound, a great sound. Certain people can make the original sound better. You can't go past Nina Simone's version or Josh White or Leadbelly, or Bob Dylan, but the Animals is the most powerful I've heard.
It would be, in my opinion, the best version. I suppose one of the main reasons would be because I've heard it so many times in my life growing up. It was a radio song when I was a young guy.
Yeah.
But it's pretty darn good.
Oh, absolutely. And once again, these guys are 20 years old, 21, 22.
So what do you think? So it's pretty interesting too. So very, very unheard of at that time to have a 4-minute song. So they argued, or someone was arguing with somebody for them to say that we were going to keep that at 4 minutes, when you consider most of the songs at that time were only 2-minute songs, weren't they?
Yeah. No, we had a extended organ solo, which probably went through 24 bars instead of 12. But let's face it, and probably an outro, let's face it, how can you, it's such a great epic song, a saga, or quite dramatic song. How can you squeeze that into 2 minutes? You can't.
So again, we have to appreciate somebody at the recording studio, someone in the recording company, someone in the to say, look, we got to fight for this. We can't chop it down like they tried to do with Light My Fire, you know.
Oh, yeah, horrible.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
yeah,
cut. Oh, that was terrible. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, you know,
I remember
we got to let it run.
extended version. Absolutely, that's how it was intended to be. So don't let me be misunderstood. Organ again. Da, 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 da.
So who was tell us. So who's responsible for this organ? What was that something that Eric Burdon heard somewhere and he wanted to bring into a band? I don't know anything about that, or was that band already going with an organ and they recruited Eric Burdon as a what happened? Tell us.
Apparently, Eric Burdon joined the Alan Price combo. So Alan Price was obviously A band leader, B a virtuoso, and C handled the arrangements.
Okay, so they were playing this kind of music anyway, and so Eric Burdon thought, shit, I could probably enhance this band with my vocals.
Yeah.
And they gave it a go. And
absolutely.
And it sounded good.
Absolutely. So they had the tough grittiness of that Newcastle sound. You had Eric Burdon, who was authentic and people respected because they believed everything he sung about.
All the band members from Newcastle?
I think so. Yeah, I didn't quite check into that, but they all had a unique. They all played a unique part. I mean, Chaz Chandler did some really clever bass lines.
Sure.
The guitar player basically played second fiddle, just some nice, interesting licks and melodies. No guitar solos whatsoever. So very much organ based. Like, we got to get out of this place. It starts off with that bass line. It's My Life. The organ is just incredible. Don't Bring Me Down. I mean, just these are big, great songs. Great songs.
Okay, so I'm just going through some of my notes here. That I'm pinching from a book. So Alan Price had a fear of flying, which apparently had bit of a effect on the band and where they could play and how they could play too. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, the band went through like 2 phases. They had that. Well, maybe 3. Well, obviously their club phase in Newcastle, but the main phase being obviously London, Britain, selling lots of singles. Apparently got bulldozed over with bad management deals and money owed.
Yep.
And then they all went to San Francisco, which Eric Burdon really reveled in. He just loved the sun and the hippie culture, really. And almost a second incarnation of the band, and they did pretty well. So that R&B sound, the House of the Rising Sun, It's My Life, we've got to get out of this place. Quite very Londony grey cloud music, isn't it? It's very indoorsy. When they go to San Francisco, everything changes. Everything gets very sunny and psychedelic and mushroomy.
It's kind of interesting because in that Suburban Steps to Rockland, they interview Eric Burdon, and he's saying when he's a young guy, he's watching Cyril Davis, and he's hearing him for the first time, sitting right there in front of him, playing his harmonica through a microphone. And he's hearing the first time ever, right in front of him, Chicago blues. You know, he's hearing that, so he falls in love with it, and then becomes a Chicago blues proponent and exponent himself. Kind of interesting because he goes to America, and one of the reasons why all the hippies love him in San Francisco is because they see him as being an authentic blues man, as opposed to the psychedelic kind of stuff that was going on in America. Interesting that an English guy is seen as the
Oh, absolutely. But obviously he also was intrigued with that Californian sound and probably immersed himself in all those free concerts. You see pictures of him Monterey. He's at Monterey, wasn't he? And
Well, Van Zenny's jumping into the chat here, and he's saying that Chris and Chaz were tops in his book for that time. Wow.
So Chaz Chandler, and who's Chris? Chris was Chris the...
Hold on, I'll tell you. He'll tell us. Chris. Just hold on. Hold on. The New Animals, Barry Jenkins, Zoot. Hold on. Alan Price. Hold on.
Oh, Chris Hillman? No.
Hold on. Chris White.
Chris White. Chris White played... Oh, was Chris White the next organ player?
Must have been.
Okay,
I'm just trying to have a look. Just trying to have a look here.
Because they replaced...
He left the band in '65 and was replaced by Dave Rowberry from Mike Cotton's Sound. Alan Price went on to a very successful musical career on his own. Alan Price set.
Yep.
All these names. Yeah. Phenomenal.
Absolutely. And
so, where would you rate the Animals in your list of categories for influential British acts? Is it too early for me to ask that question?
Oh no, I think they're I think they're giants, heavyweights. I really do. I mean, I just don't have best of.
Chris White is the bass player for the Zombies, of course.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Van Zenny, but thank you for answering the question. Okay, Carl. Sorry, you were talking.
Yeah, just timeless. I mean, once again, they were clever enough to have a bluesy sound. They knew about the R&B, Motown. They loved Sam Cooke, who I love Ray Charles. They were the first British guys to talk about Nina Simone, and then obviously with the blues and R&B sound, they forged their own sound with that organ. Once again, that organ, and so they realised, obviously, the Stones had two guitar players, Beatles had two guitar players. You had your Eric Claptons and your Yardbirds and your Jeff Becks. They focused on that kind of R&B blue collar sound. I mean, they reckon that House of the Rising Sun, once again, we talk about music critics and categories, it was the first ever folk rock song, or biggest folk rock song, or something like that ever. Because it was actually original kind of a folk song. The song was, I think, written in the 1910s or 1920s.
Wow.
So it went through a lot of different versions, and it was like what they call a standard. You know how you have those standards? Certain songs, which is called a standard, where they just do the same song.
Sure.
But yeah, no, they're heavyweights, and Chaz Chandler, obviously, like a lot of these guys. Yeah, he had a good ear. I think Chaz Chandler dead? Was he alive? I'm not sure. I think he died.
I can check that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said that a couple of years ago, but I know that Burdon's still alive, though.
Yeah. So Chaz Chandler obviously was a clever guy, bass player, businessman. Obviously, we like him because he brought us Jimi Hendrix. Alan Price, what an unsung hero that guy was. You don't really hear much about him, but he was the big backbone of that band as well. So I really like them in the sense that like you mentioned, I think they play a really important part in that British sound.
Yeah, so Van Zenny's confirming that died way back. Chris, Chaz, yeah.
And there was this quote when Bruce Springsteen heard "We Got to Get Out of This Place." He was just a young kid. Was one of the biggest influences he ever had in his whole career. He said that was
Oh,
every
really?
song I've ever written. He said that was Born in the
Wow.
USA. What was that other song they did?
Dancing in the Dark.
What was his big breakout song at the start? Born in the
Born to Run?
USA. Born to Run. That's it. Yeah. So he said that was his first political, socio-economic kind of blue collar song he'd ever heard. It made complete sense to him, and that was everything he's ever wanted to be. That one song.
Wow.
So there you have Bruce Springsteen. Yeah, a massive influence on Bruce Springsteen.
I did not know that.
Yeah, neither till today. I knew not about the Animals, but not who they influenced. And another thing too was, your Stones had the Chuck Berry Muddy Waters thing going on. The Yardbirds had the Howling Wolf thing going on. The Eric Clapton had the Freddie King, Robert Johnson thing. Peter Green had the BB King. Eric Burdon, along with who we'll talk about next week, really showcased John Lee Hooker. Their version of Boom Boom's really good.
So how do you rate Eric Burdon as a harp player?
I think pretty good. Hey, more of a singer. I think that he puts a lot into his music. Once again, a bit like the Zombies, I really like him, but I've never really fully explored them ever.
Sure.
I've always put all my eggs in one basket. I've been a bit, Rolling Stones and certain people, but
yes.
what's that?
So he'd be like Mick Jagger, a pretty good harp player.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, then there's two levels of harp players. There's those guys like your Mick Jaggers and Eric Burdons, Keith Ralph, or John Mayall. They play okay, but then you get that next level of white harmonica player, which would be Charlie Musselwhite, that guy that played with Eric Clapton's From the Cradle, the Jewish guy Portney.
Yes.
And then there was another guy called played with Muddy Waters. And we can't forget about Paul Butterfield, who actually played properly with the harp, the bullet microphone, and the right amp.
Yeah, Butterfield was probably the first real decent white harp player in America that had any kind of notoriety.
Yeah, I think a lot of those guys tried to be like Sonny Boy Williamson, who never played that saxophone style. He played that country harp, but played it really well.
Yeah.
But the Little Walter played that thick sound with the trills and the bullet, and made it sound like a saxophone,
Chicago style.
Yeah, and I liked that a lot. But very, very few white people could master that.
Yeah.
Was there a white player from England that did? I don't think there was. Lee Berlow from the Dr. Feelgood was pretty.
Well, they reckon. Don't forget Cyril Davis, eh?
Oh, so I heard a pretty good sound. You heard that sound down?
Yeah. Okay. There's some clips of him playing on YouTube. So go back and spend some time checking him out. Did Alexis Corner play the harp as well?
I think so. I don't know. Yeah, I'd like to investigate that a bit more. Because a lot of these guys, by the time, obviously they were there pioneering in the early days and helped all these young guys because they were a generation ahead of these guys. But is there much stuff of them on record or did they have anything?
I suppose what we have to do now is probably just check out Spotify's or YouTube Music. That's got it all.
Yeah, unreleased tracks or bootlegs or there's another guy that was pretty good called Duster Bennett. He played harp, didn't he?
Duster Bennett, yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Yep. But and Peter Green played harp, as we know. Robert Plant tried. Yeah, but they all played that Sonny Boy Williamson style, which is kind of the harp through the mic going through the amp, as opposed to that little Walter sound was the harp through a bullet microphone. Is that right? Or
That's correct. And Portnoy gets it, does a pretty good job on that From the Cradle, and a subsequent tour with Clapton does a pretty good job.
Absolutely. There's another guy who played in the late 60s, white guy with Muddy Waters, and he had an amazing sound. He had a German last name, but yeah. No, I like the fact that Eric and the band had their own sound, R&B sound, and they stuck to what they knew. Once again, they're pretty short-lived, 2 or 3 albums. That was about all, as far as that early stage.
Yeah.
They didn't have what we got to really admire the Beatles and the Stones, because of just that longevity of consistency.
Yeah. When you consider, if you're doing a comparison between, these bands that lasted for 2-3 years during that mid 1960s period, or even 3 or 4 years, the fact that the Beatles were there for 8 years. Yeah.
Oh, but their body of work is just insane. It's incredible. But another thing we've got to mention last week about the Zombies is that Rod Argent started a band called Argent, didn't he? Or
yes,
something.
Yes.
Slow ride. Take it easy.
Yeah.
He managed to get a few bills paid in the 70s, that one song.
Well, that's a great song.
Yeah. They thrashed it in America on the classic rock, the 70s rock stations.
There's an awesome DVD that's the title song of some young guys in America during coming of age film. And they thrash
really?
It. They thrash it.
Yeah. That and Golden Earring with Radar Love.
Hold your head up high.
Yeah, all that stuff, eh? But I think Eric had a few little hits with that. He went onto American bands, didn't he, and stayed there for a while. So it's quite interesting. These English guys, went to what they thought was greener pastures, crossed the Atlantic, and then crossed the whole country to San Fran and made their base. John Mayall and Eric Burdon, and we'll talk about him next week, Van Morrison.
I think what we've got to remember in America, and let's just use the bluegrass festivals as an analogy. You can make a good living, Carl, by touring as a performing musician, playing at some gigs, if you've got a bit of a reputation behind you. And certainly Eric Burdon did that. He took advantage of who he was by going around playing at a lot of these jazz and blues festivals that were going on in America at the time, and making a good living out of it, So he didn't necessarily have to lock himself in a studio and come out with this a major hit album, And
it probably coincided with the simple fact that their affairs were all in a mess, their financial affairs. And you mentioned go to America, bigger audience, more shows, better management, renew your contract with Columbia or whoever, will sign up the new label, tour, buy a house with views, water, sunshine, girls, lace, what's it called, turquoise jewelry, and
well, the Stones tell us very clearly. The Stones tell us clearly. They had to tour. They had to tour America to make money. That was the golden calf.
That and to get any kind of recognition nationwide and ultimately worldwide.
Yeah.
Well, Charlie Watts said once you conquered America, you conquered the world.
Yeah. That 72 tour.
Wow.
There was only one band, man.
Wow. Yeah. So Eric had enough money from the farewell tour to buy Edgewick or Southwick or what's it called? Chapstick.
Hurtwood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And 24 years old. 25 years old. He buys a castle.
Paid cash.
freehold from the jump.
Yeah. Got his manager Roger Forrester to pay cash for it.
Shit. So no mortgage.
No mortgage, man. It's a cash deal, brother. Cash deal.
Fuck. Shit.
Still lives there.
Wow. Must be a nice place. No, you're right. I mean, hey, I don't blame these guys, and they're not selling out or going commercial. They just, going to a different audience, a different music scene. Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood and House Rising Sun and all those great songs where they played their part, they did their thing, and Alan Price, a bit like Bill Wyman, didn't like flying. These bands, they go in a different direction. So,
yeah.
But it was interesting. They I think they renamed the band then Eric Burdon and the Animals. So
That's
obviously
correct.
Eric was the star, obviously.
I also think from a contractual point of view too, they couldn't be the Animals, they had to be, it's like the Animals 2019 Limited, Eric Burdon and the Animals. So it was a separate management deal. It was just to make sure that nobody from the previous management team would get a sniff or a chunk of anything that they, that they were going to do, because there's crook managers around every corner and in every record company.
Oh, look at Jimi Hendrix and all those blues guys. So I think my ship sailed when it comes to music and management, but I'm learning being in with tax and IRD, you got to get stuff right, eh? You got to get it all right. So
you can't cheat the tax man. No. He's going to lock you up.
So look at the Stones, yeah. So hey, we've been touring 6 years straight. We've done 4 albums and 4 #1 songs, and we've got no money. So yeah.
Yeah, in fact, any albums that they released, the taxes that they would get from any future British releases wouldn't be enough to pay back their tax bill.
Shit. So I wonder who writes.
Mate, they were paying 75 cents, 75p in the pound taxes back then.
Because of how much money they made.
Yeah. 75.
I thought if you're the if you're the upper echelon of making money, that it maxes out at 33%.
Oh, look, I'm not an expert on what was happening with income taxes back then, but I do know that any new money was taxed differently from any old money.
There must be some greedy idiots that wrote all these laws a long time ago about income tax and provisional tax and pay-a-week tax and state law and federal law and country law and international law and tax law. Far out. It must be just written a long time ago to.
No, you've got to take them at their word. They're there for the common good. They're lawmakers.
Golly.
They're there to make it an equal playing field.
So, yeah, where did all their money go? Shivers. Yeah, no, that's been a really... it's been those guys. Can you imagine working that hard and then finding out you got no money?
Wow,
you'd be livid. So obviously Eric Clapton with Cream had a good management, eh?
Yeah, Roger
Stigwood.
Robert Stigwood. Yeah, had a reputation for being a fair man.
Led Zeppelin got filthy rich. So Peter Grant did well with them.
Peter Grant made sure right from the word go, though, he'd learnt all the lessons. He had his ear to the ground, knew what a band could do on the scale of Led Zeppelin. So he was squeezing money out of everything.
Wow, merchandise. And then unfortunately you had the other people, Sharon Osbourne's father, who with Black Sabbath screwed them, and Alan Klein screwed the Stones and the Beatles.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
obviously it was a bit like
Yeah.
steroids. They said, here's a whole bunch now, get you all excited, get you hooked in,
Yep.
but we won't tell you about the long-term plan. But just sign this for now.
Yep.
They
Yep.
far out. And is it
Yep.
Michael Jackson own the Beatles? Does he, or still owns the Beatles?
Well, his son does.
Shivers. And who brokered that deal? Paul McCartney?
Look, I can't remember, but so Paul McCartney found out that the royalties were coming up. They were coming up. They were going to be made available, and Paul McCartney was going to make a bid for it. Now, don't hold me to this, but somebody close to Paul McCartney at that time had mentioned it to Michael Jackson, because they did a couple of songs together in the early 80s. Yeah. So they were pretty tight.
Say
what you believe and don't and ebony and ivory. Yeah. Okay, so there goes our song. But anyway, they were tight, hanging out in the early 80s. So there was some there was something going on, and the short story of the long version is that Michael Jackson heard about it and jumped on the deal.
Wow, man! If you owned the Beatles or the Rolling Stones catalog, you and your family would be wealthy for generations to eternity.
Well, when Never Never Land was hemorrhaging money towards the end of Michael Jackson's life, it was hemorrhaging money, and he wasn't making any money. It was the Beatles catalog that was making all the money for him.
Far out. Oh no, there's some horrible. We'll have to do a show on it one time about the crooks in the industry. But
I'd love to.
Elvis Presley had a similar sort of situations. There was Sly Stone just a few years ago got rewarded millions of dollars from back pay.
Oh, really?
Because he got screwed over big time. It's all the same sort of people too. It's really sad.
Yeah.
That's why Chuck Berry was quite bitter. He knew that all his black brothers were getting screwed left, right, and centre. That's why I watched an amazing document. Yeah, cash up front, and all he toured with was a spare set of clothes, a toothbrush, a comb, and one guitar. And the promoter organised a backup band who could either be really good or really terrible.
Yep.
So
he stayed in the cheapest hotels or motels. Didn't eat out. Yep. He was really tight with his money.
So he would have heard all the stories, about the guys getting ripped off.
Wow. Yeah.
And we saw Cadillac Records, same thing. Chester Burnett bought a house, had a wife, stayed out of the limelight. Muddy Waters was a bit, lived two lives, didn't he?
Yeah.
Always had to ask for an advance.
Yeah. But Muddy had lots of girlfriends too, So.
Oh yeah, lived a different lifestyle. Yeah. No, it's very interesting. So that's another conversation within itself, is just publishing rights and music rights and songwriting rights and royalties and concerts.
So what are we going to talk about next show?
Van Morrison and Them.
Awesome. I promise I won't hijack the beginning of the show. I'll let you talk about it straight away. I'm sorry. I took this show away on a tangent at the start.
It's all right. No, well, you just basically following up on the show before Simon Williams. Is that right?
Yeah. Which is always related.
Oh no, just bang the series out, because I'm seeing a connection now with these musicians from these smaller towns. They obviously had the best. Oh wow, maybe grape. They obviously were the best band in a small town, and they went to the big city, and then yeah.
Yeah, we're going to do a show, Carl and I, in a couple of days' time, Sonia, around this time. So if you, yeah.
What time's it in Texas now?
What time's it in Texas, Sonia?
Because we can accommodate them.
Yeah. Yeah, we can always go. We can always go later next time or earlier.
I can knock off work a little earlier for them.
It's 9:15. It's 9:15 p.m. So that's not that bad.
Oh, that's a good time then. Yeah, it's a good time. Otherwise, it'd be too late. Yeah, if they want to do 12 o'clock, if they wanted to start at 8, I don't know. Yeah, or whatever.
Oh, everyone's in lockdown. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
How's your phone?
Oh, good. So there's no staticking. So it seems to be the headphones is the only way to go, eh?
Oh, awesome. Do you still want to carry on talking, or do you want to knock off? What do you want to do?
Oh, I've got a little bit of juice left, only 15%. So
okay.
If you got some questions, or if you want me to summarise what we talked about, it's up to you.
Yeah. If you can do a summary for Sonia, that would be great.
Oh, neat. Yeah, no, Sonia, hi. So we're just doing a 5-part series about some of these R&B bands that are really important that we've all heard on the radio, and just want to put a spotlight or showcase not only the lead singer but some of the other band members. And in this case, we're finding out that the Zombies last week, the Animals today, them and Spencer Davis, and then ultimately Rod Stewart, that especially the 4 bands, is the organ and the keyboards played a big part into those great songs. Like, I mean, in 2 weeks' time or a week's time, we talk about Spencer Davis, that Give Me All Your Loving. It starts out with the driving organ sound, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I got a funny feeling. I think Simon Williams could appreciate this, being a church-going guy, is that a lot of these guys would have started in the church, organ players, right?
Well, I mean, Simon, he mentioned that last night. Yes, he did. Trained musicians. The fact that these guys, these organ players, were a little bit different, say, from the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. They were trained musicians, Carl. Yeah.
I got a funny feeling. Yeah, Alan Price, the guy in Zombies, the guy in Stevie Winwood. Yes. These guys would have been conservative homes, proper. Mum probably was a stay-home mum. Dad worked.
Yes.
And church on Sunday, rehearsing hymns Saturday night. I mean, look at Brian Jones. He played the organ. His father played organ in the local church, or the mother did.
Sure. Yep.
So it was second nature to them, probably an organ or a piano in their house. What do you want to, what's your hobbies?
Or a piano in the local English pub.
Yeah, exactly. So it's probably very much a big part. The guitar was probably quite a new thing to England. Keyboards was very much a part of their culture.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. Keyboards, certainly, you look at any old films, what are they playing in the East End? They're playing around a piano. Guitar is very much part of the youth culture, youth instrument.
Well, the first electric guitar was mid-50s. It was pretty much a phenomenon. It was a bit like Luke Skywalker with the is it the lightsaber?
Yeah.
Use the Force, Luke.
Yes.
So the keyboards really were fundamentally a big part of, and maybe the Doors were influenced by these British bands, because Raymond Zarek not only Light My Fire, far out. There was probably an influence there with the Animals, but with the keyboards, you had the luxury of playing bass lines with the pedals at the bottom, didn't you?
Big time.
So, because there was no bass player, I don't think, in the Doors. They might have put a bass player in the studio for the album cuts, but live, definitely no bass.
No.
So yeah, Sonia. So we are really just putting a spotlight on these really great tough R&B bands that to this day are treasured.
Yeah, and I appreciate
Um,
the fact that Carl has taken the time to research and highlight and draw some of these threads out for us to link them into that whole British blues scene, which is the whole existence for this channel.
yeah. I mean, there's sort of like two categories. You got your Erics, your Peter Greens, your Mick Taylors, your Jimmy Pages, your Jeff Becks on this one mountain soaring, and then you've got these other R&B guys on this kind of smaller mountain, not quite the same height or the peak,
Sure.
but or rolling hills at least, doing these other things, and they all complement each other. I mean, I
Okay,
would hate to have 50 bands with 50 amazing guitar players. It'd be too much noise.
so
So you got
Sonia's
to make.
saying yes, thank you, Carl, and you got a heart there, and great
Oh, cool.
Vanzini is yeah, good stuff, Carl. So yeah. So yeah, everyone's appreciating the fact that you're helping us draw some links and just filling us in.
Oh, thanks. No, hey, no problem. I just and it just comes to me. I'm like thinking about this little. I'm thinking to myself about zombies, and I think about the organ, and all of a sudden, we're talking about the animals, and all these songs all their melodies are organ based. So yeah. So just the beautiful journey continues.
Yeah, so I've just thought of something. So you've just spoken about the organ there, and I've just remembered something. John Mayall plays the organ
Yeah.
on that on that album that we were talking about. That's before. Yeah, we can't forget that.
Oh well, he mainly played the keyboards, but in Stormy Monday he switched up to organ, didn't he, to do the layering?
Yeah.
Which is yeah. Or John Mayall, you're a clever guy. Clever guy. Guitar, organ, piano, and harmonica.
So Sonia's asking any opinions on the band? Yes, they seem to use keyboards a lot too. Rick Wakeman is a keyboard god. Absolutely, Sonia. I think what we might do is we might probably get a big group together to do that program because I know that Great Vanzini is a Yes fan. So I think we have to get Great Vanzini on. I don't know anything about Yes. What about you, Carl?
Not
got
much.
any?
No. My uncle, who's a big into music, he had all those early 70s. They call them prog rock, prog rock.
Yeah.
Which was Yes. Even Stevie Winwood goes into that a little bit with Traffic, and then they had who was that other band? It was a whole bunch of them. Was it Procol Harum? No.
Procol Harum. Yeah. So if we were going to do a Yes program, Sonia would have to get Great Vanzini because I'm pretty sure, and he can confirm that in the chat, that he is a Chris Squire fan. So if he's a Chris Squire fan and nut, he must know a little bit about Yes. Here he. I know nothing except the bass player. Scared on the. Okay, all right. Okay, we can't do a Yes program unless someone else like Kubrick Lover or Simon. In fact, Simon might be a Yes nut.
Oh, it wouldn't surprise me. He's got that sort of way about him. It's very intelligent music, isn't it? It's very, quite sophisticated.
So we'll have to get some feedback on that one for you, Sonia. If yeah. But always open to any suggestions in the chat.
I'm just having a quick look here for Sonia. Oh, there's too many. Because I never quite got into it. but I can appreciate them all. Yeah, Pink Floyd were definitely into the organ. Rush, not really. Don't forget about Genesis, King Crimson. Yes is number 5. Yep. Dream Theater. Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Wow. Keyboards.
Yeah, I'm
Flamboyant
not.
use of the Hammond organ, Moog synthesizer, and piano.
I'm not a prog rocker. I don't know much about it.
Neither do I.
I'm just a simple blues man.
But there are Supertramp, yeah, but there are these guys do. Oh, Deep Purple, of course, with the prog rock. The organ, shit, it's very English, isn't it? Very English. That's what I'm learning now. Progressive pop and origins, background, 70s. Yeah, even Queen, a whole bunch of them. But that's another journey right there. That's another galaxy.
Yeah. One that I can't participate in. One that I can only take a backseat role in.
If I was enjoying that galaxy,
but happy to host.
If I was going to join that galaxy, I'd be calling up Sid Barrett and got any stuff left? Because I need to go on a journey.
No, I'd be happy to host anyone that wanted to talk about these bands, but I couldn't contribute to any conversation or discussion.
I tell you what, though, because they're so technical, you've got to really admire how clever they are.
Oh, yeah. That's a given. Yeah.
I think if you threw Keith in with them and said jam, Keith would be a little bit lost.
I think most of the guys we know.
Hey, sorry, mate, just know E, A, and B. Can't help you.
Yeah, I can't read music. Most of these guys are all music readers too. You know, they have to.
Yeah.
To play that kind of music, you have to read time signatures. You have to know chord changes.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
Yeah. Otherwise, you'd just be left behind, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. I did remember my uncle playing some of that stuff on a record player. Stuff to be exact, and we know some of the obviously the catchy songs from the radio, but very clever guys.
Oh yeah.
Clever, and probably influenced by Eric, but just took it to another level. You know, more than likely Gibson's going through Marshalls. Probably some of them played those big jazz guitars, those Gibson jazz guitars, didn't they? Who's someone called Carlton? Someone Carlton or I forgot.
Larry Carlton.
That's it's
Yeah.
Hey, my phone is officially about to die now. I've actually got a 30 minutes extra juice out of it.
Okay, look, I appreciate you jumping on board.
Oh, here's the other one. ELO. Electric Light Orchestra.
Oh, yeah.
10cc.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, big time.
If those guys
we'll see you in a couple of days.
If those guys are happy with that time frame, that'd be great.
Okay, so today is Monday here in New Zealand, so I'll see you Wednesday.
Yep, and great Vanzini. You would not know Procol Harum had a guitarist. Well, Billy on their first LP. Wow, that's a good. Didn't know that either.
And Sonia's saying thank you, Carl. So that's wonderful. So
awesome.
I'm going to sign off. Thank you, Great Vanzini. Thank you, Sonia, for joining us and being part of the conversation. Carl and I are just hanging out, and Simon and I will be doing a show in a couple of days' time too. So we're going to get Great Vanzini on, Carl. He's going to talk to us. He went from the British blues playing rock and roll to playing jazz fusion in the mid-1970s. So he's going to tell us about that transition and what happened from his jazz fusion days. So I'll keep you in the loop because you might want to jump on that show. So I'll let you know.
Well, that prog rock was basically a combination of rock, a little bit of psychedelia, but a lot of jazz.
Yeah. So when we go live with Great Vanzini, I'll give you a yell and so you can jump on. How about that?
Sounds good.
Awesome. You're a legend. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining
really
Carl and I. Be safe, be cool, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
See you guys.